Intoxicated. I am intoxicated right now, but not the way you're thinking. It is shocking how we use some toxicants. We were very comfortable around them. I'm gonna give you 3 examples. Lead. Nowadays we know that there is no safety exposure limit to lead. It's a toxicant, period. But in ancient Egypt, we used to put it in our eye makeup. That's right. We used to apply it directly in our eyelids.
Literally?
A second example is radium. Radium is a radioactive material that can cause different types of cancer, but it's also well known for glowing in the dark. Back in the industrialization time, it was used for making glowing watches, so you could put them in your wall and see the time in the dark. The females that were hired to paint these watches with the radium material were advised by their managers to lick the instrument to make the perfect shape to paint the watches, meaning that they got direct contact with the radioactive material. You can imagine that in the following years they developed different types of cancer, including the jaw cancer. Yes, you get it right, the whole bone is destroyed. My third example is thalidomide. In the 1950s, it was well advised for fighting morning sickness for pregnant females. What happened next? 40% of the embryos died, and the rest that survived were born with limbs defects, meaning that their arms and legs were not properly developed. This is a perfect example of why we need to carefully test anything before exposing it to developing embryos. Nowadays, you might think, well, that was back then in the 1950s. We are way better right now. Well, you are wrong. Nowadays, we are exposed to a huge amount of industrial chemicals like never before. And we need to understand how these chemicals are interacting with us as a complex. We also need to prevent and see how they affect embryos and infants. We can be very clear only about 5 of these industrial chemicals for infants and embryos. But we know that 214 have been causing harm in adults, and around 1,000 have been shown to be neurotoxic for laboratory animals. This means 1,214 possible neurotoxicants during development for infants and embryos. The problem is that we are not being preventive. We are dealing with industrial chemicals as if they are innocent before proven guilty. And by the time we prove them guilty, it might be too late. Most of the time, the effects of industrial chemicals are irreversible. It seems quite challenging, and it is, to keep up with all the industrial chemicals we are exposed to. But don't you think it's time to find out how intoxicated we truly are?